another Friday, and this is it. We're here with a new episode. If this is the first time you're pressing play, my name is Ama Mefajman, and I am also known as Tinkerbell, Emmy, Doris, depends on where you know me from. But I respond to all these names and identify with all these names. So welcome. Choose whichever one you want to call me by. This is Conversations with Ama, and we've been talking about domestic abuse. The essence of this podcast is to help educate, let victims and survivors know that they are not alone, help myself learn more so I can be of help to anyone who will need help navigating their thoughts in a confusing marriage or in an abusive relationship. So this week I wanted to talk about so many things. Like, in fact, I had like 4 titles that I was researching, and then I started writing things down. Then a lady lost her life to domestic abuse. I mean, the story is still in court, so we'll not really touch on it. But what made me do this episode on the 5 fly freeze Fawn response has been so many posts on social media flying around, people writing things, and you can see that even though they mean well, they are uneducated when it comes to abuse. So they think they are saying the right things, but they are actually not. They are actually damaging victims, and they are not feeding people who can help victims with the right kind of information. So how is that going to help anyone, Now, when abuse happens, any kind of trauma, it could even be from your childhood. Initially there were 3 responses, but now there are 4, right? I've said when it comes to abuse and the road to healing for victims or survivors, one of the most important but understated tools is a support system. Now, here's what happens with a victim of abuse. There is either a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode based on their personalities and their experiences, right? So now let's break it down. What this means is for fight mode. Now, do you know anyone who seems to lash out in anger at the slightest provocation, or is constantly anxious and avoids conflict by immersing themselves in work, school? How about the one who is overwhelmed when it comes to decision making? Pete Walker, a complex post-traumatic syndrome disorder survivor. That's what we call CPTSD. And the licensed marriage and family therapist has discovered a 4th response called fawning, which leaves the victim wanting to act right to avoid punishment. They are very accommodating of people. Fawn types seek to safely merge with the wishes and needs and demands of others. Mind you, all these responses, let me interject, all these responses are unconscious. Victims or survivors don't even know that is the kind of survival mode they are in. It's a survival mode to combat the abuse, because that's what their minds have adapted to. So they either fight, they either flee, they either freeze, or they fawn. We'll break it down. So they are all these responses, like I said, are unconscious, and as a result of an ingrained belief that by being whatever it thinks that their mind tells them they can combat their abuse. So their actions are not based off of logical reasoning, but of combating the abuse. Do you understand? And when that is the case, you will make mistakes, right? So let's talk about the fawn types. The fawn types are people who feel like by filling their abuser with more love, by acting right, by doing the things that they need to do, the perpetrator or abuser will leave them alone. So they are triggered to people please. They are some are unexpressive about their emotions because they feel like if they express it, they will elicit a response from their abuser, which will make things worse. They care for others over themselves. They will make sure everyone around them is okay to their own detriment. They say yes to suggestions that they even want to avoid. They avoid conflict, and they are very calm and warm. So when this happens, they just want peace. They just want peace. So based on the mode in which a victim is, their actions will be dictated by that mode. And that's if they are fawning, they will try to satisfy their abuser. They will try to do things that will make the abuser stop. But that is it. You can't make them stop. They've made a choice to be who they are. So I feel like if abusers understand this, I feel like if victims and people understand these modes, they will be of better help, to survive this. As a note, most trauma survivors tend to lean towards one stress response. It's important to remember that no one response is better or worse than the other. If you find yourself stuck in one of these responses and it's affecting your quality of life, I will say seek a trauma-informed therapist. Don't just take it. Don't go to a counselor. I've said this over and over again. Counseling it won't help you with trauma. It won't help you with abuse. So please. So let's talk about the fight mode. Survivors who tend toward the fight response innately believe power will guarantee security and control that they lack in their relationships, right? So their best mode is, you know what? I am fighting this. I am going to make sure that I give them a dose of their medicine. Now, this creates more conflict because the abuser is looking for control and you are looking to take that control back. So there are, in some cases, victims of domestic abuse who fight back, talk back, also hurt the abuser back in all kinds of ways. Those people are in fight mode, and even after they've left, everything about their healing is about fighting. A healed mind seeks peace, So fight looks like self-preservation at all cost. This trauma response can manifest in explosive outbursts of temper, aggressive behavior, demanding perfections from others, being unfair in interpersonal confrontations. So they tend to project the anger, the fight that they are feeling in them. If you are doing business with them, if you work with them, if you have to deal with them as even a friend, they can be sometimes very overbearing, right? Because they are stuck in that mode of fighting, and most of the time people feel like, oh, they are too much for me, I cannot deal with them. But it's a mode, and they themselves don't even realize that they are stuck in that mode. Therapy is the door to healing. If you don't examine, and then there's a role that victims play in abuse happening. You've got to accept the role that you played and then ask questions why you allowed it to happen, because there are always signs, but like I said, for abuse to be established, there has to be a series of incidents, right? Because sometimes if it's a one-off incident and it never happens again, but it's usually physical, verbal. It usually starts from verbal. It's the overt abusers who are instantly hitting and they don't care about who's watching. When it comes to covert abusers, trust me, you will not know. So there's a lot of pent-up anger and emotions, and they either project this on others or it becomes inward. Now, the flight response. Survivors who tend towards the flight response are usually chronically busy and they are perfectionists. They feel like they have to always be doing something, working, learning, studying, selling, doing something, so they take their mind away from the abuse that's happening. They don't want to examine any facets of the abuse. They don't want to have to deal with it. They just want to run away. Flight can look like obsessive thinking or compulsive behavior, feeling of panic, anxiety, rushing around, being a workaholic, over worrying, and sitting down to relax, taking time off to relax is like a burden. Now, the freeze response looks like spacing out, feeling unreal, isolating yourself from the outside world, being a couch potato. Survivors who tend towards the freeze response are often mistrustful of others. They don't want to have any kind of interactions with humans anymore. Like, they're done. Literally. They don't want to have any form of interactions. They just want to disappear, time to freeze and for the trauma not to affect them. They find comfort in solitude and they're sometimes dissociated, so they are mentally frozen, and so they are out of touch with reality sometimes. So they are spaced out, they are having difficulty making and acting on decisions because they are frozen in time. And like I said, we talked about the Fawn response, where the victim, kind of pours more love into the relationship, and just feel like, oh, this will be better if I express more love to the person, So we tend to seek out relationships that make us feel comfortable and familiar. So they work hard to be warm, pleasing in relationships, and it can mean attracting abusive relationships because they feel familiar, especially if you've experienced some kind of abuse or you grew up in a high conflict environment. So it feels familiar, so your mind adapts to it, So if you're more emotionally connected to someone, you tend not to correct them, all the time or criticize the person. So when you are with them, you don't even vocalize your boundaries or say when they are crossed. So that's it. If you're a trauma survivor, you're not alone. There's no shame in struggling with fawning, with flight response, with freeze response, with any of these response. There's absolutely no shame, because it's a trigger. You've been triggered and you act on it and you go into safety mode. It's your safe zone for you, but it is unhealthy. You will need to talk to a trauma certified therapist. I can't overemphasize this. Get a trauma certified therapist. Don't just go to a counselor, please. It doesn't work, So all these things are self-protective armors that help the survivors live through abusive and sometimes dangerous circumstances. And so a lot of people don't understand it. Though fawning tends to assuage anxiety and makes you feel a little bit safe in the environment, it can actually silence your voice and prevent you from healing or surrounding yourself with people that truly care about your well-being. For the fawn types, because what you're doing is you are trying to prevent the abuse from happening by being a perfect reflection of what you think the abuser wants to see in you. So it's a very complex situation, and I will say that get a therapist. If you need any kind of resource, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. You deserve to take up space. I am holding up space for you to express anything that you want to express. I'm holding out space for you to speak whatever you feel. Speak up about it. Speak to someone who will listen. No judgment, no critique. Your thoughts, your feelings, opinions, and boundaries matter. You are perfectly enough just the way you are. You don't need to be more. You don't need to be less. You don't need anything else to be who you are. So please, when people are giving commentary on domestic abuse, bear in mind that a victim might be operating from any of these responses, and then it affects how they act. So please, the commentators everywhere, read, listen to podcasts, do your research. Don't just be writing things, because if we're going to help with advocacy, we need to have the right information. So please, let's put in the work so that we'll all have a happy environment to thrive, live, and work in. This week has been extremely draining. I don't want to take up too much of your time. If you find time, you can read up about the flight, fright, flee, and freeze response, and the fawn response. It's either they fight, they flee, they go into a freeze, or a fawn response. And these four will determine the kind of approach a victim will take. So that's why it's not black and white. It's not a gray area, and it's not a good thing to ask, why didn't she leave? They freeze, they fly away, they flee, they are in fright, or they are in a fight mode. As always, I want to say thank you to you for listening. Be kind, believe victims, support victims, call out abusers. Don't hide behind anybody and not feel like you don't have to talk about it. Call out abusers and stay safe. Corona is still with us, so please stay safe until we meet again. This has been Amma, Tinkerbell, MFA, Emmy, whichever name you call me by. I respond to all of them. I love you. Take care of yourself. Take care of your mind. Take care of your heart. Take care of your soul. Have an amazing week, and God bless you. Please share the podcast with someone who needs it. Everybody needs to listen to it, because I think that everyone needs to be educated about these things. As always, I love you, and see you next week.